The eccentric geocentrist, a distinct view of Christ's reign, history, and the cosmos. The core beliefs in summary. Completed millennium. The writer firmly believes that Jesus Christ's prophesied 1,000-year reign, known as the millennial kingdom, has already taken place on earth in our past. This was not a figurative or hidden event. It was a literal, golden age of peace and divine order, with Christ physically present as king. Importantly, this period is not something we are still waiting for in the future. It has already been fulfilled in history, although later covered up and concealed for reasons explored below. Satan's little season now. According to this view, we are currently living in the period known as Satan's little season, which is described in the book of Revelation. After Christ's millennial reign, Satan is released from his prison for a little season to deceive the nations one final time, cf. Rev. 23:7. The writer interprets the present era as exactly that period, a short deceptive epoch where evil is once again allowed to have an impact. In other words, we are not waiting for a future tribulation or Antichrist to come, as many traditionally believe. We are already living through the devil's final deception phase in the tail end of history, just before the final judgment. The confusion, corruption, and spiritual struggle we are witnessing now are the hallmarks of this little season, when Satan has been temporarily loosed to mislead the world again. This perspective brings both a sense of urgency and hope. Urgent, because deception is rampant and ever-present. Hopeful, because the chaos won't last forever. It signals that we are nearing the ultimate resolution under God. The writer is convinced that we are living in the final chapter of a cosmic drama that is soon to reach its conclusion. The Tartarian Golden Age hidden history. A key component of this belief system is the notion that the millennial kingdom of Christ coincided with what some refer to as the Tartarian civilization, a highly advanced worldwide civilization that has been erased from conventional history. In the writer's view, Tartaria was not just a legend or a fringe idea, but a real historical manifestation of Christ's Golden Age reign on earth. This civilization enjoyed free energy, harmonious living, and peace, possibly utilizing divine etheric technology and knowledge that we can barely comprehend today. However, after Christ's 1,000-year rule ended, Satan's little season began, bringing about a great cover-up. There were cataclysms, resets, and deliberate historical alterations, such as the mysterious mud floods often discussed in alternative history circles, that destroyed much of Tartaria's infrastructure. Powerful forces then rewrote history to bury the truth of that golden age. What we learn as history today contains large gaps and inconsistencies. For example, the so-called Dark Ages may actually have been an era of light under Christ, later scrubbed from our collective memory during Satan's deceptive season. Therefore, magnificent Tartarian buildings, free energy devices, and advanced technologies were either attributed to other causes or omitted entirely from historical records. This belief holds that clues to the cover-up are still visible today in our architecture, maps, and myths, if one knows where to look. In short, the Tartarian Empire was part of Christ's millennial reign, and its demise and erasure serve as evidence of Satan's long-running efforts to deceive the nations during this little season. Time itself is broken. Unlike mainstream Christian theology, which treats time as a neutral stage in which history unfolds, the writer views time itself as a corrupted and degraded aspect of creation. Originally, under God's perfect design, time was meant to be something very different, possibly even non-existent as we understand it. The writer believes that when Satan rebelled and fell, he somehow fractured the fabric of creation, shattering the original harmonious reality. In this cosmology, God's creation was like a perfect, continuous toroidal energy field, an endless divine loop that functioned without interruption. However, Satan's fall broke this unity, causing creation to become fragmented. The consequence of this fracture is what we now experience as time, a glitch or drip in the cosmic system that introduced decay, separation, and waiting where there was once only unity. In practical terms, time is viewed as a temporary distortion, a kind of cage or cycle that traps our existence in repetitive patterns, such as day-night cycles, life-death cycles, etc. This broken state will not last forever. The belief is that at the final judgment and the ultimate restoration of all things, time as we know it will be repaired or rolled back into eternity, freeing creation from the ticking clock of entropy and loss. One explanation says, originally there was one perfect toroid of God's glory, but Satan's fall smashed it into 7 dripping ceilings, and that drip is what we've been calling time. Christ's mission was to free us from this distorted, time-bound state, and judgment will restore the eternal flow of God's kingdom. The original creation's design cosmic etheric context, central to the writer's understanding, is a cosmic ether-centered view of creation. The writer believes that God as the Father existed as an infinite electric creative force dwelling in eternal waters. Water itself is considered eternal, as Genesis 1:2 mentions water being present before the other creation acts. God spoke existence into being by splitting those primordial waters and shaping them into a structured reality. Originally there was no time, and creation existed in perfect harmony, encapsulated in a unified toroidal field. This field was governed by one original ceiling that separated the waters above from the waters below, as described in Genesis 1:6-7. In this original creation there were no separate layers. There was a single unified cosmic order, in which everything existed in eternal flow. The universe was essentially a single, unbroken toroidal field, with no fragmentation or separation, and Earth sat at the center. Time, as we understand it, did not exist. There was no separation or decay, because creation was whole and unified. However, after Satan's fall, this perfect harmony was shattered. The fracture introduced time as a distortion. Creation was broken into 7 layers or ceilings, each representing a level of cosmic separation. These 7 ceilings divided the once unified field into discrete realms, and the waters above and below were separated into layers. The fracture caused by Satan's rebellion marked the beginning of the cosmic shift and the advent of time as we know it. Each of the 7 ceilings corresponds to what might be called a level of heaven or a planetary sphere, from the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and so on, up to Saturn and the outermost realms. The unified toroidal flow was disrupted, and time began to bind us to this fractured reality. Before the fall, the toroidal framework was very good and reflected God's power, with ether flowing seamlessly through all realms. The ether is seen as the medium of God's Spirit, filling the toroidal layers with divine energy. The entire creation was formed within God's primeval waters, reflecting His eternal power. Biblical verses such as Genesis 1:6-7, the firmament separating the waters, and Isaiah 66:1, heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool, are interpreted literally, suggesting that God's house is the eternal water, and the created world is His footstool. Geocentric and multi-layered cosmos. The writer's belief system is heavily rooted in a geocentric multi-layered cosmos, where physical and spiritual realities are deeply intertwined. Understanding this grand design, the sevenfold structure, the role of aether, and the disruption caused by the fall, is essential for grasping the other points outlined. This cosmic perspective sets the writer's views apart from most modern Christian interpretations, which rarely take the physical structure of the universe into account when considering theology. For the writer, the heavens declare literal truths, and one must take into account the etheric, electromagnetic design of creation to fully appreciate prophecy and history. This cosmic framework provides the backdrop for why time broke, how Christ's reign was possible, and how Satan's deceptions have worked, especially through manipulating humanity's knowledge of the true cosmic order. Why this isn't preterism, or any other eschatological trend. It is important to clarify that this belief system is not preterism, despite the superficial similarities. Preterism is a theological position that claims that most biblical prophecies, especially those found in Revelation and Daniel, were fulfilled in the early centuries of Christianity, often in 70 AD, with the fall of Jerusalem, or the end of the Roman Empire's persecution of the Church. Preterists often argue that Christ's coming and judgment happened in the past, such as in 70 AD, and that the millennium is either symbolic of the Church Age or not a literal golden age on earth. In contrast, the writer's perspective asserts that the literal reign of Christ did happen on earth, but it took place much later in history, potentially during the so-called Dark Ages or Middle Ages, and tied to the rise of an advanced global civilization, Tartaria. The writer believes that Christ's millennial kingdom was covered up, not acknowledged by preterists, and is invisible to mainstream historical narratives. Additionally, preterism does not account for the notion of time itself being broken, and doesn't recognize the need for an eventual restoration of divine harmony. This perspective goes far beyond preterism by asserting that Satan is still active in his final deceptive phase known as the little season, and that we are still in the period of deception and awaiting the final restoration of all things. Clarification regarding tribbers and futurism. Many Christians today are heavily focused on end times prophecies, often referred to as tribulation-focused or tribbers. These believers are looking ahead to the 7-year tribulation, the appearance of the Antichrist, and Christ's second coming to establish the millennium. From the writer's perspective, however, these tribbers are preparing for the wrong scenario. The tribulation and the anti-Christian empire already came and went with Satan's binding in Christ's reign. What is happening now, in the writer's view, is largely deception, where false fulfillments of prophecy may be staged to confuse and test people's faith. This includes the possibility of a mock tribulation event, or even a fake second coming. The writer warns that if tribulation-focused Christians expect events to play out as they have been taught, they may experience doubt or panic when those events do not occur as expected. In short, Satan's greatest weapon now is the rewriting of history and the manipulation of perception. It is not a straightforward, open persecution, but rather a hidden deception embedded in human history and understanding. Restorationist movements and Mormonism. The Church of Christ and similar restorationist movements claim to restore the true New Testament church after centuries of apostasy. From the writer's perspective, there is a significant irony in these movements. While they claim to restore the truth, the writer believes that the true faith wasn't lost during the so-called Dark Ages. Instead, it was alive and well, particularly during the millennial kingdom under Christ. The suppression of the millennium after Christ's reign led to the confusion we see in modern church history. Likewise, the LDS Church Mormonism claims that there was a great apostasy shortly after the time of the apostles, which was corrected by Joseph Smith in the 19th century. From the writer's perspective, Mormonism introduces a new mythology, which distracts seekers from the real hidden truth, the fact that the millennial kingdom has already occurred, and that Christ's reign was deliberately concealed. Both restorationist movements and Mormonism fail to recognize that the true historical and cosmological narrative has been deliberately hidden by Satan during this little season of deception. Conclusion: a respectful clarification for Christians. The writer's goal is not to attack the faith of tribulation-focused Christians or any other group, but rather to invite them to reconsider their assumptions about prophecy, history, and the cosmos. This belief system is not merely an alternative interpretation. It is a framework that helps uncover the hidden truth of God's plan, and it calls on Christians to recognize that the truth of God's kingdom is far more astonishing than we've been led to believe. In short, the writer's framework asserts that Christ's reign already took place during the millennial kingdom, and evidence for this exists in forbidden history like Tartaria. Holds that we are currently in the final chapter of a cosmic drama, living through Satan's final deception. Encourages believers to re-examine their assumptions, question the official narratives, and search for the truth. This perspective reframes current events not as chaos, but as the dying convulsions of evil, before God's ultimate restoration of harmony. Ultimately, this framework urges Christians to rediscover the Christ-centered reality that encompasses all of history and creation, leading to the final unveiling of truth in the world to come. Final encouragement. The writer encourages fellow Christians to seek the truth fearlessly. Question the narratives we have been taught, whether religious or historical, and prove all things. With a humble heart and open eyes, one can find that God's timeline and universe are far more wondrous than we have been led to believe. This is the reality the writer urges others to see, a reality that is anything but the same old preterism, and one that leads to a deeper, more profound understanding of Christ's reign and our role in this cosmic story.